Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing another one of the would I repurchase this palette videos. So I've done one of these in the past, but there's a ton of them going around here on the YouTube space. Most prevalently, I see them often on Emily's channel, and I'll link those down in my description box for you. She is who I watched it first, if I do remember correctly. So I thought it was a really smart idea. The first time I did this though, I rolled a number and then and the number was 4. And I ended up pulling every 4th palette out of my collection. There was a ton of palettes that I went through. So I have written down all the palettes that I went through previously, and this time I just picked 10. I just went through my collection and I picked 10. I don't know if you guys can see, but the little dude that was up here holding some of my palettes, it broke. My palettes got super heavy on it apparently when the glass shelves broke. So my husband's trying to redo it. So all of my palettes are in one spot right now. I don't have to go all over the place or, up and down to try and find them. So I just randomly picked 10 different eyeshadow palettes out of my collection based on what I didn't have already had chosen for the last video, and I hope that sounds like something that you're interested in. What we're going to be doing is talking through these 10 palettes, why I would not or why I would choose to purchase them again. And that's always fun. It's always fun. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high and colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a field leader for Ulta Beauty. Get a lot of education in my position. I like to bring you that education here on my platform, but ultimately, I just really like talking about makeup. So I'm out here talking about makeup, and I'm assuming that if you're here, you also like to talk about makeup. So I'm a real kicking pants. I'm super fun to hang out with. I hope that you'll find that this channel brings solace to your soul in the way it brings solace to mine, and that you'll want to stick around. So with that said, let's roll into this. Would I repurchase this? Kind of palette review. I kind of went through all the palettes that we had already pulled out and kind of looked through what was left of certain brands and kind of pulled 10 palettes. Not kind of, actually did. Actually pulled 10 palettes. Not kind of. I don't know why I keep saying kind of. But we're going to start, and we're going to start with this one. So this is the Urban Decay Born to Run, and I will never forget when this came out, how absolutely stoked everybody on the platform was to have something other than an Urban Decay Naked palette. And I also was one of them. I don't wholeheartedly love the Naked formula. Almost every single Naked palette that I have had in my collection has been decluttered. And I do have quite a few other palettes from Urban Decay that I didn't love. Honestly, Urban Decay is not my favorite eyeshadow formula. While I do think that this is not a horrible formula, there are some duds in this palette. I also don't think it's the best. And while I can't seem to get rid of it in a declutter, I just don't think that this would be a palette that I would pick up again if it were like on the market today and I were looking at it. Would I purchase this? Probably not. I think that there are far too many satins in this palette than anything. It's kind of a mix of satins and mattes. There's no real shimmers in here. The satins don't function well enough as a like quasi matte to be a matte and an eye look. And like I said, there are some duds in this palette that just like this one here and this one here are especially this one here, worst shadows I have in my collection. But also like some of these darker satins are beautiful, but the rest of the palette is just really, really boring. So I know what my aesthetic is now. I don't think, when I purchased this, and I know that I don't need this in my collection. While I think that it was a beautiful palette for its time, and while I think that it was something that everybody fell in love with because of the whole like travel theme of it and all the things, and I love the mirror on it, I just don't think that it would sway me to purchase it today. The next palette I have is the Melt 420 palette, and this is an absolute no-brainer. The one and only thing I hate about this palette is that sound. Like, I can't. I can't. I hate touching it. I hate rubbing my fingers across it in any capacity other than whatever it is that doesn't make the noise. But this palette, you guys, this palette is gorgeous. It is a perfect like fall color story. And if you are new here, I really like a good like orangey brown and almost red eye look on. I'm kind of wearing that today. This falls right in line with those orangey eye looks that I love so much in the fall. I have an affinity for Melt Cosmetics and their formula, and I know a lot of people hate Melt Cosmetics formula here on this platform because it's just kind of fickle and you need to finesse it in a certain way. But I have never been disappointed with the palettes that I have purchased from Melt. Now, the stacks, completely different story. I did end up decluttering those, but I've never been disappointed with a palette, and this one, it falls into the same place. I love this palette, and yes, I would 100% purchase it all over again. The next one I have is this ABH palette. This is the ABH collaboration with Jackie Aina. And this happens to be one of my absolute favorite ABH eyeshadow palettes. I love the like duochrome shadows in this. I love that the mattes in here are super pigmented and super poppy. I also don't find that this has a lot of the same problems in this palette as some of the other ABH palettes do, in that it doesn't like fall out a whole hell of a lot. Yes, it falls out. It is an ABH palette. I just absolutely love this palette. I had a really good time with it. The only one that I don't 100% love, I think, is this one here, which is Trust Issues, but it is a beautiful like white to gold duochrome. So I mean, it's got some really like pretty basic shades in it, but it's also got some really beautiful, that deep purple is a really great deep purple. This purple shimmer is a great purple shimmer. This one here called Sponsored, amazing like green to like almost dark blue duochrome, is just gorgeous. Like, this is one of my favorite ABH eyeshadow palettes, so if this were out today, I absolutely would repurchase this palette. And just so we're clear, I do have a palette roulette on every single one of these palettes, so I will put that down in the description box as well, the link to that series, so that you guys can go check these out. The next one I have is this one, and this is the Becca Pearl Glow Shimmering Eye Palette. So I bought this at TJ Maxx, so it didn't cost me all that much money. And this is one that I should declutter. And the biggest reason why I should declutter it is because these mattes are total poop. They are not at all what they need to be impactful in an eye look. But these center 6 shades here are stunning. And that is the reason why I continue to hold on to this palette. I would not, never in 100 years, repurchase this palette, but I will hold on to it until the day I die, or until those shadows are gone, because they're just, I mean, they're stunning. They're stunning. They are beautiful, like inner corner shades. They're beautiful, like highlight shades, brow bone shades, and I just kind of swatched those right over the top of each other. Sorry about that. But they're so pretty and impactful in an eye look. But I absolutely would not repurchase this palette. Another one that you might be surprised about that I wouldn't repurchase is this one. So Lime Crime is a formula that I kind of fell in love with last year, and I actually quite like this palette. But I don't think that I would repurchase it because of the color story. It really just doesn't work well with each other. Like, this is a palette that I find that you really do need to pull in other palettes to help it work with itself, and that's fine. That's fine. That's not something that is like a deal breaker for me. Obviously, I did purchase this palette, but I believe that I do love the shades in this palette, but I also believe that I have palettes that have these shades in it and then some. So it's a real cohesive mindset when it comes to, you know, this color story. And I don't find that this is a palette that I'm consistently wanting to pick up because the color story is just so thought-provoking and not as easy to use. I do think it's beautiful. This shade here is a truly beautiful, like almost non-existent eyeshadow shade. It's just this really sheer, like ghostly, like green eyeshadow shade that looks just beautiful in the inner corner and also is a brow bone shade. I do think that the shades in this palette are beautiful, but I also just don't think that I would, knowing what I know now about it and the struggle to use it, because while it does have some beautiful shades in it, they don't really kind of go together, and the mattes that are in this palette do not work well with also the shimmers in this palette, in my humble opinion. I wouldn't repurchase it. But I do love Lime Crime as a formula. Like, their formula is really, really good in my humble opinion. So I wouldn't repurchase that one. This is the Nomad by Juvia's Place, and this falls right into the same kind of color theory thought process that the 420 palette falls into from Melt. I do like Melts much better than I like this one. It's just a more elevated price point, but it's also a more elevated formula. But for that color story on a budget, like, this is the perfect color story, or this is the perfect palette for that. This isn't one that you can get anymore, which is very sad. If it was available today, if I could get it again, yes, I would pick it up more than likely. I think that it's got a little bit of redundancy in it with like these yellows, but one of them is a like matte with shimmer in it that can perform as a shimmer, and the other one is just a little bit more muted than the other one. They do look exactly like on the eye, so there are some opportunities with this palette to be had for sure. But there's also a lot of beautiful, beautiful eye looks that you can get with this palette. And I, of course, have a great time with it. And again, it falls right into that fall tone eye look that I really love on my own eyes. The next one I have is this one. And this is the Oma Beauty Black Magic Allure palette. And this palette actually kind of shocked me when I utilized it in my palette roulette. And the reason why is because it is full of glitters. Everything on this top row is a glitter shade. But I did not care. I loved this palette so dang much. A glitter glue on the lid, one of those glitters on the top. Perfect, one and done. Like, honestly, beautiful, impactful eyeshadow look. And it reminds me a lot of the ABH Subculture palette, only I feel like this is just a smidge bit better of a formula, if I'm humbly honest. I love ABH. It's one of my favorite formulas, and I love that palette. It's also one of my favorite palettes, but that formula, I think we can all agree, was not ABH's best formulation in shadows. This one definitely, I think, has a better shadow formula for the same kind of color story that you're gonna get from that Subculture palette. Only these shimmers are so much more impactful. Like, I felt like a boss in this eyeshadow palette. I love this eyeshadow palette. 100 times, yes, I would repurchase it. And it actually makes me want more from Oma Beauty, but I haven't pulled the trigger on any of their other eyeshadow palettes. None of them really speak to me like that one did. Like, I beelined it to the store to pick up that palette. That palette was going home with me. The next palette I have in here is this one. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Walk of No Shame Quad, and I recently did a palette roulette on this quad, and if you watched that, you will know that no. I got this in a Beautylish Lucky Bag, and I'm glad I got it in a Beautylish Lucky Bag because that gave me the opportunity to try Charlotte Tilbury eyeshadows, and I have heard that the ones in her quads are not quite as fantastic as the ones in her regular size eyeshadow palettes, but this one, I did not love this. I think that this really put into perspective for me that Charlotte Tilbury is really overrated and really overpriced. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some things in my collection from Charlotte Tilbury that I absolutely love and that I would spend the money all over again on, but these quads are super expensive and this just wasn't it. It wasn't fantastic. The two shades here are satins and they're too shimmery to be anything other than a shimmer or a satin on the lid. You can't use them to deepen out an outer V. I mean, you could, but I am not one that loves an extra shiny eye. I do like shine, but I like it to be on my lid space, not all over my eye. These were also almost the same exact color when it comes down to it in an eye look. They look too similar to be in the palette together. These two also look very, very similar. One is a little bit more pink than the other, but I mean, I did not love this palette, so I would not repurchase that palette. And then we're down to two. And one of them is a, I don't know if I'd repurchase it again. And the other one is, I would absolutely repurchase it again. So do we know which is which? Pause it. Tell me down in the comments section. Listen, I like this palette a lot. And that is why I go back and forth with, I just don't know. It is the Pat McGrath Labs Celestial Divinity palette. This is the holiday palette from, what, 3 years ago at this point? This is what the palette looks like. Listen, it is a beautiful eyeshadow palette. And I love Pat McGrath shimmers the most. I am not a huge fan of her mattes. It doesn't offend me that there's only 3 mattes in this 18 pan eyeshadow palette, okay? This one, and this one. I just wish that they were a little bit less pink and that there was a little bit more variation. If there's only going to be 3, please make it 3 that go with just everything. And they just don't. I am okay with the fact that most of the eyeshadows in here are shimmers. I'm not okay with the fact that the mattes that are in here don't really go with the palette. They do go with some of the shades, but not all the shades. And that's where I really feel like this was missing something for me. There's only 3 mattes. When you're carrying around something this big, I travel for work. And when I'm carrying around something this big, I want it to be all encompassing, and this one just isn't. It just isn't. Also, it doesn't really have anything super, super light in it. While this one looks super light and this one looks super light, they're actually pretty deep on the eye. So it doesn't, there's not like a brow bone shade and there's not an inner corner shade. And like, it's just not a palette that I think that I would repurchase if it came down to it. With that said, I like this palette a lot. I do. It serves a purpose in my collection. I just don't know that I'd repurchase it. The last palette is an absolutely yes, I would repurchase this palette. And if you've listened at all to anything that I've said over this whole video, you know my favorite eye looks on myself are oranges and reds, orange and red and yellow eye looks. This is all like pinks and reds, and it's got those pops of blue. Every single eye look that I have done out of this palette has been so beautiful. I've loved it. Every single one of them. I don't think there's a more perfect palette for my aesthetic than this one, if I'm honest. It gets really, really deep. It has really, really light tones. It has plenty mattes, plenty shimmers. It's just such a perfect palette, in my humble opinion, for me and my aesthetic. It matches my hair. I mean, what more can you have? Manny is also one of my favorite people on the planet. So there's that. He doesn't know me from Adam, but he's one of my favorite people on the planet. With that said, those are the 10 eyeshadow palettes that I brought to you today to talk about whether we would repurchase them or whether we would not and why. And I hope that you learned something. Also, as I said earlier, every single one of these palettes has a palette review done on it by me. And that is linked down in the description box for you. And go visit some of the other channels that I've seen do these that I have linked down there for you. I would love that for them. Thank you guys so much for coming to my video today. I appreciate you so much for being here. Let me know what you think of these palettes. Would you purchase these palettes? Would you not repurchase these palettes? Do they exist in your collection? Are they on your FOMO list? I would love to hear from you guys down in the comment section. I love having conversations with y'all down there. So don't forget to hit me up. Give this video a like and a comment and a share or whatever you want to do. I hope that you just liked it enough that you'll want to stick around and you'll subscribe to my channel before you go. Thank you guys so much for coming today. I appreciate every single one of you for being here. I hope that you and yours are well, that you're safe, that you're healthy, and that you're getting along as best you can in this world that we're living in today. I hope that you are all loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.